Actually ended up flying 38 combat missions. Typically you would didn't fly every night, but flew 2 missions when you did fly. I always flew with the same guy. He was my combat pair, David Judge Watner. He is captain at Federal Express now. And all of our missions were Kuwait or Southern Iraq for us. And you would typically, on these missions, you would fly the first mission, you'd have a pre-strike refueling, go and do your mission, then we landed. We had a forward operating base that we landed at. It was a King Khalid military city. And then we would gas up, get our next orders, and then we would fly in, do another mission, usually half an hour in the target area, and then we would hit a tanker on the way home so we could make it all the way back. Preparing for a mission, we got up late. We were the night flyers, so we got up in the afternoon. Once you got just typical getting ready, you would go to the chow hall and everybody else is having dinner. That was your breakfast. And then we showed up at the squadron and you checked where you were on the flying schedule and saw who you're flying with, in case they had a substitute in there, something. You would check your weapons loadout, what you were carrying that night. And then you would go to life support first. You'd get your, check out your weapon, go ahead and put it in your vest so you'd have that for the rest of the time. And then we had a mass briefing that you would go sit in. And you'd have the intelligence officer give you like what happened the night before, get you an intel brief. Then the weather guy was very important. We'd get up and give you the weather brief. You would then you have to go back to mission planning and get your particular target set, and what you were doing out of the frag was basically the air tasking order. And look up your 2 ship, it had it by call sign, and you'd see everybody else flying. And then you would go sit in a room and you would have brief it up. You know, since I flew with the same guy all the time, we pretty much had the brief down to like 5 minutes, even though it was a combat mission. You know, everything was standard. And then we'd get an intel top-off brief. Sometimes they would give us actual targets to hit. Other times we just had they called it a kill box. It would be, 30 by 30 mile grid. So we would go to intel to see if they had any targets in that grid that they knew about. And that'd be our starting place. Once you got all that done, then that was the other thing. You had to go by life support and suit up and put your G suit on, your harness, get your helmet. And then you could walk to the airplanes, but we generally took a crew van out there because you had so much stuff to carry. The A-10 is primarily a tank killer. That's how it was built. So that's what I always had in mind, was looking for tanks. And if you shot it and it blew up, it was a tank. If you shot it and it didn't blow up, we called it an artillery piece. And at night it was kind of hard to tell. Everything kind of looked the same to us. So the targets we were really looking for were the tanks. And the way the Iraqis had them set up, they were in revetments that were basically just a big sand berm shaped like a C. And then the tank, with your infrared targeting system, it looked like a box sitting down there. And they would have those APCs. If anything that was shooting that you knew was alive, then that was a good target to go after. And especially like a AAA piece, because we kind of took that personally. If the guy's shooting back, that was something you want to get rid of. So that was basically our target set. Probably the most common danger was people shooting at you, because you had systems designed specifically to neutralize you. So you had surface-to-air missiles. They had a lot of nice Soviet-built equipment, SA-6s, SA-8s, SA-13s. They had man-pads, which are shoulder-fired weapons. I think the SA-7s, SA-14s. They had the ZSU-23, you're talking about. They also had ZU-23s that were towed AAA pieces, and they brought one back to Myrtle Beach. I think it was a 14.5 millimeter, like 4 guns. They had it out by wing headquarters, and you could track planes in the pattern with it, with wheels and everything still worked on it. Other threat was other airplanes out there. There was so much stuff crammed into the airspace, You had the B-52s, you had all these coalition forces out there flying around, that you pretty much had to stay in your area, your altitudes, to make sure that you didn't have like a mid-air collision at night, or something bad like that happened to you. So we had one night we were in doing our kill box, and we're flying around, and you typically spend about 30 minutes in a kill box, and you see all of a sudden there's just a laydown of bombs going through the area. It's like a B-52 bombs, and we're like, okay, the bombs are down there, the airplanes are up there. They had to come through our altitude. And we got back and we looked at the air tasking order, and sure enough, they just hadn't been deconflicted properly. But it's kind of the big sky, little airplane theory in a lot of cases. That another big threat for us was the ground. So flying at night, you had to stay. If you got disoriented, you just had to come back in and get on your gauges and make sure you didn't have call it control flight into terrain, or CFIT. So you didn't want that to happen to you. And one thing we did at night was we dropped parachute flares to light up the area. So as they came out of the plane, they'd pop and they'd float down for like 4 or 5 minutes. And if they weren't perfectly, they typically dropped at some type of angle when they lit up. So you had like a false horizon, and then that became your horizon. Looking at that, and you would get your gyros in your head would get all twisted around. And he also, as a flare, it got really bright, it just lit everything up on the ground, and you start looking for stuff. And then we get dimmer and dimmer as they fell, and it was kind of the lightning bug effect. You had an effect where you would get closer to the flare. You just kind of, because it's getting dimmer, you tried to make it look the same. And before you knew it, you would be, sideways, or, I remember one time specifically pulling back on the stick, and it didn't do what I thought it was going to do. And I looked in at the attitude indicator, and I was in a 90-degree bank, and the nose was up, and it didn't make any sense to me. But they always tell you to trust your gauges. So I looked at the gauges and recovered the airplane, and regardless of what my head was telling me, and everything was okay.